We're restructuring the senior management tier. That was how Douglas Renton chose to begin. Not a greeting, not even my name. Just a sentence delivered while he shuffled papers, avoiding eye contact, as if I were already gone. I sat across from him, hands folded neatly in my lap. The same posture I had held through countless negotiations, market crashes, and boardroom conflicts over the past 30 years. The office felt unchanged, yet strangely distant. The oak desk between us had been there longer than either of us. Douglas had been behind it for just 6 weeks. "Your position has been eliminated," he said, finally looking up. "My name is Maris Dean. I am 63 years old, and until 15 minutes ago, I was Senior Vice President of Operations at Halcyon Ridge Capital. I helped build this firm from 3 rented rooms above a pharmacy into a national investment institution managing billions." "I see," I replied, my voice steady. "May I ask about the timing? I'm scheduled to retire in less than 8 weeks. "The timeline is non-negotiable," Douglas said. "We need immediate implementation to meet quarterly projections. Human resources will handle your exit." He checked his watch. "They're waiting." Of course they were. I stood smoothing my blazer. "Thank you for the opportunity to serve Halcyon Ridge," I said, extending my hand. He hesitated just briefly before shaking it. "Security will assist you out," he added. Security. 30 years. Reduced to being walked out. As I stepped into the hallway, the silence felt heavier than any boardroom I had ever faced. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet, precise realization Douglas Renton had made a decision, without understanding what he had just removed. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. By doing that, you're helping meaningful stories reach the right people, someone out there who might need this message more than you realize. I'm curious, where are you listening from right now, and what time is it there? This is a fictional story inspired by real-world situations, with some elements enhanced using AI to make it more vivid and engaging. I hope it leaves a lasting impression on you. Emily Carter had been my executive assistant for 12 years. If I was the face of operations, she was the system behind it. She was waiting outside my office when I returned, her eyes red. "I just heard," Emily whispered. "This is outrageous, Maris. After everything you've done." I gave her a small, steady smile. "It's business, Emily. Nothing personal." But even as I said it, the words felt thinner than they ever had. I moved through my office slowly, choosing only what mattered. A framed photo from a closing dinner years ago. A small plant Emily had insisted would survive my schedule. The ceramic mug my grandson had painted, uneven, bright, alive. Behind me, Kevin Brooks stood quietly by the door. I had approved his promotion years ago. Now he looked like a man forced to witness something he didn't believe in. That's everything he asked. That's everything I said. We walked through the office in silence. Conversations stopped without anyone speaking. Screens stayed on, but no one was working. They were watching carefully, respectfully, helplessly. Outside, I placed the box in my trunk. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Dean," Kevin said softly. "You're doing your job," I replied. "How's your daughter, still studying engineering?" He looked surprised. "Yes, ma'am. She made the dean's list." "Good," I said. "She'll go far." I closed the trunk and looked up at the building. 15 floors of glass and steel. When I started, we had 3 rooms above a pharmacy. The drive home felt longer than usual. Familiar streets, familiar turns, yet everything felt slightly out of place, as if something fundamental had shifted without warning. Michael Dean, my husband of 38 years, was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in. He took one look at the box in my hands and went still. "You're home early," he said. "What happened?" "I've been restructured," I replied, setting the box down. "Effective immediately." "What?" His voice rose, instantly sharp with disbelief. "They can't do that. You're 2 months from retirement, Maris." 30 years. It's done, I said quietly. He began pacing, anger building with every step. "You built half their client relationships. You held that place together. Have you called Charles or the others?" "They need to know I haven't called anyone," I said, glancing at the clock. "And I'm not going to start now." He stopped staring at me. "You're just going to let this go?" I met his eyes calmly. "I'm going to dinner tonight," I said. "I already have plans." And beneath the calm, something deeper had begun to take shape. Mercer's was already half full when I arrived, the low hum of conversation blending with the soft clink of glassware. It was the kind of place where deals were rarely signed on paper, but decisions were made all the same. Eleanor Whitmore was seated at our usual table, a glass of bourbon resting untouched in front of her. At 68, she still carried herself with the same quiet authority that had turned Whitmore Capital into a global force. "Maris," she said, standing as I approached, "you look different." What happened, I had planned to ease into it to soften the edges, but Eleanor had never been someone you could mislead with politeness. "I was let go this morning," I said simply. Her glass touched the table a little harder than intended. "They fired you 2 months before your retirement. The new CEO is restructuring," I replied, keeping my tone even. "It's not unusual. It's reckless," she corrected sharply. "Especially now." I said nothing, letting the weight of her reaction settle. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Do you know what they've just done?" I met her gaze but didn't answer. "You're the reason half of their major investors stayed," she continued, "including us." That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. "There's more," she added. "Charles Bennett called me after your last Thursday game. He's been uneasy about Douglas Renton for weeks, said the man was too aggressive, too focused on short-term returns. That caught my attention. Charles had been with Halcyon Ridge for nearly 2 decades. If he was questioning leadership, the situation was already unstable. "And what did you tell him?" I asked. Eleanor's eyes didn't leave mine. "I told him as long as you were still there, I wasn't worried." The implications settled between us, quiet but undeniable. "That was last week," she said. "Things have clearly changed." The waiter arrived with our drinks, but neither of us touched them. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to see it clearly. Douglas Renton hadn't just removed a position. He had removed the one variable holding everything steady. The next morning, I was in my garden. It was early, the kind of quiet that only existed before the city fully woke. The air was cool, the soil still damp beneath my hands, as I knelt among the rose bushes, trimming away what no longer served a purpose. Gardening had always been my way of restoring order, cutting back carefully so something stronger could grow. My phone rang. I brushed the dirt from my hands before answering. "Good morning." Maris, the voice on the other end, said, "It's Richard Hale." Richard was the third member of our Thursday circle, alongside Eleanor and Charles. His tone was different from usual, measured but heavy. "If you're calling about golf," I said lightly, "I'm afraid I won't be able to make it today." "I already know," he replied. "Charles called me last night." "Of course he had." "I was going to speak with both of you today," I said. "Getting dismissed 2 months before retirement after 30 years, Richard said. "That deserves more than a quiet update." I exhaled slowly. I don't want anyone reacting on my account. These things happen. There was a pause on the line. "This isn't just about you," he said finally. "We've all had concerns about Douglas Renton's direction, his push toward aggressive algorithm-driven strategies. It's not what we invested in." That aligned with what Eleanor had hinted at. "Charles is furious," Richard continued. "He's already been on the phone with the board since early this morning." I straightened slightly. "Richard, tell him not to act impulsively." "You should hear it from him directly," he said. Another call came through. "Charles." I closed my eyes for a brief second before switching lines. Maris Charles's voice came through immediately, sharp and controlled. "I've just informed the board," he said, "that we're withdrawing our entire commitment." The garden fell silent around me. And just like that, the consequences had begun. I sat back slowly, the phone still in my hand, as Charles's words settled into something heavier than shock. "Charles, you didn't need to do that," I said quietly. "Yes, I did," he replied without hesitation. "This isn't just about how they treated you, Maris. It's about what that decision represents." I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. "Our commitment was $80 million, he continued. "Money they're counting on for the expansion. And I'm not putting a single dollar behind leadership that dismantles the very foundation we invested in. I knew better than to interrupt him when his voice carried that kind of certainty. They've replaced relationship managers with analysts who don't even know our names, he said. They've shifted strategy without understanding the risks. And now, they've removed the one person who kept everything balanced. A second call notification flashed briefly on my screen. Eleanor. They're not finished, Charles added. Whitmore Capital is pulling out as well. That's another 40 million gone. I opened my eyes, staring out at the garden without really seeing it. 120 million, gone in less than a day. And Richard, I asked. He's meeting his board this afternoon, Charles said. But I'd expect the same outcome. That pushed the total close to 180 million. Not lost, withdrawn. There was a difference. I never wanted this. I said, my voice lower now. I know, Charles replied, his tone softening slightly. That's exactly why we trusted you. There was a pause before he continued. The board is already in emergency session. They've been calling since early morning. I felt my grip tighten slightly around the phone. They want to meet with you, he said. Today, if possible. With me, I asked. To fix this, Charles replied. Or at least try to. I let out a slow breath, looking down at the soil still clinging to my hands. For 30 years, I had protected that company. Now, for the first time, I was being asked what I wanted in return. If you feel like what just happened was a fair consequence, drop a 1 in the comments. Sometimes silence speaks louder than anger, and accountability arrives without warning. The boardroom felt different from this side of the table. For decades, I had sat beside leadership, presenting strategies, defending decisions, guiding outcomes. Now, I sat alone facing them, their attention fixed on me with a kind of urgency I had never seen before. Philip Grant, the chairman, leaned forward slightly. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Maris. I inclined my head, but said nothing. I want to begin by clarifying, he continued. Your dismissal was not a board-approved decision. We were informed after it happened. A small pause followed. I appreciate the clarification, I said calmly. How can I help you today? Hortian. A glance passed between the board members before Victoria Lang, who had hired me 30 years ago, spoke. We're in a critical situation, she said. Charles Bennett has withdrawn Marion Bay's $80 million commitment. Eleanor Whitmore has pulled Whitmore Capital's $40 million. Richard Hale is meeting with his board this afternoon, but we expect a similar outcome. I nodded once. I'm aware. Philip exhaled slowly. We're now facing a shortfall approaching 180 million. Without that funding, our expansion collapses. Departments will be cut. Projects will be canceled. People will lose their jobs, I said quietly. The room fell still. Yes, Victoria admitted, and that's exactly what we're trying to prevent. Philip leaned forward again. We'd like you to reach out to them, to Charles, Eleanor, Richard. See if they would reconsider. If certain changes were made. What changes, I asked. A full reversal of Douglas Renton's restructuring, Victoria said. Reinstatement of key personnel. A formal apology to you. Restoration of your compensation through your planned retirement date. Generous. Carefully constructed. Too late. And leadership, I asked. Another silence. We've placed Douglas on administrative leave, Philip said. Effective immediately. That was faster than I expected. What exactly are you asking of me? I said. This time there was no hesitation. We're asking you to help us save the company. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I studied their faces one by one. Some I had worked beside for decades. Others had only known me through quarterly reports and polished summaries. But today, all of them looked the same, uncertain, calculating, and quietly desperate. Victoria was the first to break the silence. We know this is a difficult position to put you in, she said carefully. But there's no one else our investors trust the way they trust you. That part at least was true. Philip cleared his throat. We're prepared to offer more than just an apology. We'd like you to return in an executive capacity during the transition period. Help stabilize investor confidence while we search for new leadership. I leaned back slightly, letting the words settle. Return. After everything. And what would that role look like? I asked. Flexible, Philip replied quickly. Advisory strategic oversight. Whatever you feel is appropriate. Full compensation, of course. It was a well-constructed offer, safe, contained, designed to restore what they had broken without truly changing anything. I thought about Emily standing outside my office with tears in her eyes. I thought about Kevin unable to meet mine as he followed orders he didn't agree with. I thought about the teams who would pay the price for decisions made in haste. But I also thought about something else. 30 years of loyalty, and how easily it had been discarded. I'll speak with Charles, Eleanor, and Richard, I said finally. But not as your representative. Philip frowned slightly. I'm not sure I understand. I won't ask them to reconsider based on what's happened to me, I said. I need to understand their concerns from their perspective. Their trust wasn't built overnight, and it won't be restored with a single conversation. Victoria nodded slowly. That's fair, she said. I stood gathering my things. I'll let you know my decision after I've spoken with them. As I walked toward the door, I paused briefly. For what it's worth, I added, without turning back, good intentions don't undo consequences, and this time the consequences were only just beginning to unfold. That evening, they came to my home. It felt different hosting them here, away from polished conference rooms and quiet restaurants. The setting stripped everything down to what it really was. No presentations, no pretense, just people and decisions. Charles Bennett was the first to speak. I don't care what the board offered you, he said, setting his glass down with more force than necessary. I'm not putting another dollar into Halcyon Ridge as long as Douglas Renton has any authority. He's been placed on administrative leave, I replied. Charles gave a short, humorless laugh. Administrative leave can be reversed. Eleanor Whitmore nodded in agreement. Unless there's a permanent change in leadership, I won't recommend reinstating our investment either. Richard Hale leaned forward slightly. And even then, it's not just about Douglas. The board enabled him. They approved his direction. That doesn't disappear overnight. I poured coffee, slowly listening. The room was quiet, but the message was clear. Trust had already been broken. The board has asked me to return, I said, in an executive role, to help stabilize things. All three of them looked at me. Would you consider it? Richard asked. I hesitated. I was ready to retire, I said. Michael and I have plans. Plans can wait, Charles said, then paused. Though you certainly don't owe them anything. It's not about what I owe them, I replied. It's about the people still there, the teams, the clients, the work that's about to collapse if this continues. Eleanor studied me carefully, her expression thoughtful. You've always carried responsibility well, she said. But this time, you should think about what you want. I met her gaze. And what would that be? She set her cup down deliberately. If you go back, she said it shouldn't be as a temporary solution. It should be with real authority. Charles nodded immediately. She's right, not advisory, not symbolic. Control. Richard leaned back, arms crossed. Otherwise, nothing changes. The room fell quiet again. And for the first time since all of this began, I allowed myself to consider a different kind of return. After they left, I found Michael in his study. He had given us space, as he always did when something important was unfolding. A book rested open in his hands, though it was clear he hadn't been reading. Well, he asked, looking up. I sat down across from him, suddenly aware of how tired I felt. They want me back, I said. The board. They're offering an executive role during the transition. He closed the book slowly. And what do you want? I exhaled, leaning back slightly. I don't know. I was ready to retire. We had plans. Italy. The vineyard tours you insisted on. A faint smile crossed his face. Italy has been there for thousands of years. It'll still be there. I studied him for a moment. They need me, I said quietly. Not just to bring investors back, but to stabilize everything they've disrupted. And after that, he asked. That's the problem, I replied. They want stability without change, control without responsibility. They're offering me a role, but not the authority to fix what's actually broken. Michael nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. Then don't accept what they're offering, he said. I frowned slightly. It's not that simple. It is, he said calmly. You've spent 30 years building something of value. If they want you back, they should meet you at that value. I looked down at my hands, still faintly marked with soil from the garden. The board is desperate, I said. I could ask for anything. Then ask for what you're worth, he replied. Not what they're comfortable giving. The room fell quiet. For the first time since the meeting, I allowed myself to think beyond the immediate situation. Not just about returning, but about how. Not as a placeholder, not as a compromise, but as something deliberate, something defined on my terms. Later that night, as I lay awake, the answer came with a clarity I hadn't expected. It wasn't about reclaiming a position. It was about redefining one. And if they wanted me back, they would have to understand exactly what that meant. 3 days later, I stood at the podium in Halcyon Ridge's largest conference room. The room was full employees, board members, and most importantly, investors. Charles, Eleanor, and Richard sat in the front row, their presence alone, enough to steady the atmosphere. Change is inevitable in any organization, I began, my voice calm, measured. But how we manage that change determines whether we grow stronger or lose what made us valuable in the first place. I outlined the new structure, not a return to the past, but a correction of imbalance. A newly created role, Chief Relationship Officer. Permanent, with full board voting rights and authority over all client-facing operations. A position designed to ensure that no future decision could ignore the human foundation behind the numbers. I will serve in this role for 1 year, I continued. Long enough to rebuild trust, restore stability, and prepare the next leader. A quiet shift moved through the room. I'm also pleased to confirm I added that all major funding commitments have been fully reinstated. A wave of relief followed, subtle but undeniable. From the back of the room, I saw Douglas Renton standing in silence. The board had reassigned him head of innovation strategy, a role that used his strengths without allowing him to destabilize what he didn't understand. When it was over, Charles approached me with a small nod. You didn't just fix it, he said. You secured it. Temporarily, I replied. Eleanor raised her glass slightly. Long enough. 1 year later, I retired as planned. I handed the role to Emily Carter, who understood better than anyone that relationships are not managed, they are earned. Halcyon Ridge didn't just recover, it evolved. And in the end, my greatest satisfaction wasn't in proving them wrong, but in quietly showing them what they had almost lost. I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't fight back the way people expect. I simply stepped aside and let the truth reveal itself. What I learned is this value isn't proven in the moment you're respected, but in the moment you're removed. Think about it. If you were in my place, would you walk away quietly or redefine your worth on your own terms? If this story made you pause even for a second, consider subscribing. One small action from you might help this message reach someone who needs the strength to stand up silently, but powerfully. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.